Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Fort Poppy. Going to be talking about another MTGO Value Vintage weekly event. Today I'm joined by Duncan, or Stormring Entity. Welcome.
Hello, hello. It's nice to be on the channel.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, we had a little bit of a smaller one this week, just 12 entries, but it was a lot of fun. We had some cool brews. We ended with a five-way tie for first. We had no undefeateds, but five 3-and-1s, including the two of us. I do want to just start with talking about my list, because man, I've spent a lot of time on this, and it is a bit of a meme, but I built like 20 different iterations of Charbelcher within the last week and a half, and I was really hyped to find one that I was relatively happy with and take it out and compete and actually get a pretty decent record on it with. So obviously, Goblin Charbelcher built around having no lands in the deck, using a lot of MDFCs as our mana sources. But in addition to that deck building restriction, that means I have to play a lot of tap lands, and any lands that don't enter tapped are going to cost me 3 life. I also decided to build it with Cascade, with Violent Outburst and Shardless Agent, cascading into a single copy of Channel. So not only do I get no real lands, I also can't play any other spells that cost less than 3 mana. So just intentionally making it really difficult on myself. But when I was goldfishing other versions of Charbelcher, the channel hands were just far and away the best, being able to say, okay, I have 7 life. That's what it takes to kill you with Goblin Charbelcher. I wanted to increase the consistency on getting that mana up, even though I am sacrificing a couple other forms of acceleration like Tinder Walls, Soul Ring, Pentad Prism. I thought that getting the channel online was just the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially with Channel being like such a powerful card as a one of. Having effectively 9 copies in your deck means that you're just way more consistent in hitting that on the turn 3
Yeah, absolutely.
that you
And
really want to storm off in. Yeah.
the ESGs do open up a couple of turn twos as well. They're pretty rare. The one issue with this is obviously that it opens me up a lot to heavy counterspell decks where if my channel gets countered, I do have one Ricochet Trap main deck, but no other real way to interact with it. And then any subsequent, I have 7 other Cascade spells I could draw after that are then going to be dead draws. But I decided that that trade-off was worth it. So most games are going to be won using Charbelcher, but I wanted to have a few other interesting things to channel out. One of the strongest being Coveted Jewel, just 6 mana, makes 3 and draws 3 cards. This can also say if I rip a turn 2 or turn 3 channel, Coveted Jewel can produce me some blue mana to scour for scrap and tutor out the Belcher that I can then cast the rest of the way with the colorless from Channel. And it also has a backup win line with Pinnacle Monk, which is already just an untapped land for the deck. It's an effect that I'm going to be looking for. And a Ghostly Flicker. Notably, this works even if you play the Pinnacle Monk on the land side. So say you play a Pinnacle Monk as a land, cast a Coveted Jewel, then Ghostly Flicker targeting both of them. Your Pinnacle Monk will re-ETB, putting the Flicker back to your hand, and your Coveted Jewel will re-enter, drawing you 3 cards and paying the 3 mana needed to recast the Flicker and do it again. So it'll draw your deck in multiples of 3, and I decided that just playing one copy of Laboratory Maniac was going to be the easiest way to pay that off.
Yeah, it's a pretty clean sort of fallback if they have some sort of disruption to your main channel game plan, like some sort of I don't know, like there are lots of sideboard effects that can really hurt that.
We've seen a little bit of an increase in stuff like Stonebrain and Necromantia. That was something I wanted to be prepared for. One main problem with this line, though, is that they are expensive. Pinnacle Monks are $1.33 a piece. Ghostly Flicker is $1.04. So I think if I were to bring this back, I might try a different fallback plan, but I do think it was strong to have access to. Even Coveted Jewels without that combo was really good. It's usually able to draw you into something or other to convert.
Yeah, or
Then,
filter to other colors, right?
exactly, yeah. Should generally get you there one way or another, or just have a Coveted Jewel in play. Try to go for it the next turn with 3 extra mana. Now let's move over to your deck. So why don't you just give us the primary breakdown?
Yeah, so this is like it's kind of similar to Eldrazi Post because it's based around the whole Cloud Post, Trench Post, Glimmer Post strategy, which just gives you a ridiculous amount of colorless mana. You just really need to pay off for it. The main focus of this deck is the Free Strider Lookouts. This card is like when you commit a crime, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you get a land, any land onto the battlefield tapped from among them, and you can do it once each turn. So there are a few ways to pay off that, like mainly Scrabbling Claws, where you can play it and then target your opponent with it. That's committing a crime on the first half. So if you have two of those, you can just alternate it, and your opponent doesn't actually need any cards in their graveyard to trigger this.
Oh, because it targets the
And
player, not the card. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, exactly. And it can also, in a pinch, you can activate it the turn you play it, and then activate its second ability on your opponent's turn if you need like to trigger your free strider twice in one turn. There's also just a lot of random utility in this deck. Like in the land base, there's 4 volatile faults. These are crazy against a lot of the greedier decks in the format, where you can just totally catch people off guard and like absolutely steal some wins.
It's good in the mirror match.
Uh,
It's pretty good against Belcher, as we'll find out.
yep. Another land that I really want to highlight is the trench posts. These are often a huge mana sink late game if you have, 7 or 8 posts in play and a couple trench posts. You can be milling people for 14 or 21 a turn or something.
Yeah, I find this
And
is one of
I've
the
won
most
quite
common
a,
ways that you
yeah,
close games.
yeah, especially against like control or something where you can race them by just playing land drops and they can't deal with it a lot of the time. Moving up from that, there's one of Ice Flow in the deck, which is a bit of a meme kind of test card right now. It's really clunky because it doesn't really read how you want it to. Like it doesn't work the turn you play it.
Yeah, it
You have
doesn't
to
prevent the
wait until your
damage like a
opponent's next turn.
Mazabith. It doesn't target
Yeah, exactly.
flyers.
But
But I
the
did
the
see it
big
come up. It was relevant.
yeah, it came up in one of my matches against a Ursine monstrosity, which I was having a really tough time dealing with because those things are massive and you can never trade favorably into them. They're kind of nice against that sort of stuff, but I may end up cutting it. We'll
Yeah, I think
see.
there's a lot of other value one-of lands you could fit into this base. Like you have a lot of basics, and I know some of that's for budget, but you can afford a few more colorless lands in here if they're providing the right value.
Yeah, I mean, I did have a problem with not having enough green sources a lot of the time because
Oh,
you really want to be playing the posts every turn.
yeah. Oh, and I
And
guess you're not on any of the chromatic stars or spheres like Eldrazi Post deck would.
the Titania as a one of in there
Hmm.
is really strong when you can get it to work, but the double green on that card is sometimes kind of annoying.
That makes sense, yeah.
But
And you don't really have
yeah,
fetch lands to both consistently cast it or guaranteed get one back off the ETB.
yep. Most of the time, it's like either a land that you've milled off of Rumble or it's a volatile fault from your graveyard.
Yeah, which that's strong to
Um,
double that effect, because some decks do just run out of basics.
Another the thing with Titania is that she just puts so much power onto the board. If you can get her to work right, like you're often hitting somebody for 10 the turn after you play Titania, which can be huge.
Yeah, just have someone's
Um,
life.
yeah, it's just a very good creature. Needs a bit more support, but I've been liking it so far.
But you got a lot of options for top end. I think this is a perfectly reasonable one.
The two world breakers are also quite interesting because they are a recursive threat that you can sort of rebuy later on if you mill them to rumble or they just naturally die. They can also trigger Titania with the sacrifice.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And yeah, so that's it. That's came up once for me, but the main thing is just it's a recurable threat that basically means you're never going to run out of any gas, and the cast trigger is super useful into a
Oh,
lot
yeah,
of matchups.
definitely. You got a
Yeah,
lot of interaction here as well. You are definitely trying to play control style. You're kind of pre-boarded for a lot of the Cascade matchups between Filigree Silex and Disruptor Flute. That looks really strong,
yeah,
but I know the price is very volatile on Flute.
yeah. Flute's an absolute truck of a card. Like that thing wins so many combo matchups for free.
Definitely.
As you can see, they're over a third of the budget. So
Yeah, and I think they've even gone
yeah,
up since the tournament yesterday.
yeah, they went up a little bit. I was looks like the dex has gone up about $1
Yeah.
since
And
I played
then
it.
anything in particular you want to point out about your sideboard? Cards that
I wanted to shout out
overperformed?
the Pest Infestations. That card has been absolutely insane as a mana sink later on, as well as, I have two in the main board, two in the sideboard. I might go up to a third in the main board,
I could understand that.
but they can just steal wins against a lot of decks.
Yeah,
Filigree
absolutely.
Silexes, that's for Rhinos, and O Stones, any heavy creature deck. You just want to blow up all their shit. You want to go bigger with the last couple big Eldrazi there.
Yeah, I think that's good to have access to. Kind of play to the
Yep,
strengths
absolutely.
that the other E-Post deck has proven.
Yep.
All right, next is Golgari Charbelcher. I was really surprised. I played this in my third round. You'll see those games, but another Belcher entrant at the same event. I haven't seen a lot of brewing with this card much recently, but yeah, for two people to bring it out same week. And this is obviously a completely different build. They're not cascading, so they do have access to like Mana Dorks is pretty huge. They have little bit more pointed interaction in the sideboard that I don't have access to. But their gimmick they're trying to go for is obviously Recraft the Paths is 3 mana to stack your deck however you want. This was something that I considered for my list as well, but it is a little bit slow because you can't even put a single one of those cards to your hand the same turn. You need to pass the turn and survive after resolving this, and it is also just a nightmare to resolve on Magic Online. But with Recross the Paths, obviously, if you have the correct mana, you could just make sure you have a Belcher on top of your deck, or vice versa, make sure you put something to bridge the mana to cast it, or you could put a Grist on top of your deck, and then a bunch of insects. Grist itself, got Haywire Might, Molt Tender is just a mana dork, and then Huskburster's Swarm is a decent way to close the game that also is good against Graveyard Hate. But if you mill over all of these, you can put 15 insects into play and theoretically swing out the turn after that, which is a really funny gimmick.
Yeah, the deck seems to have a pretty good fair game plan compared to yours,
Yeah.
while being a bit slower as the sort of trade-off here.
Yeah, it does have access to two sort of combo plans, but definitely a much more stronger fair plan at the
Yeah.
cost of, just a little bit of speed and consistency.
Yeah, it's quite impressive that both of these Belcher decks sort of popped up out of nowhere and both went 3-1 in the same event.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome to see.
Now, no spoilers, but a Balustrade Spy in the sideboard is a hilarious choice,
Holy.
and it may be relevant in one match.
That's awesome.
And then next up, we've got Heidel, one of the admins of the format on Mono Red Hollow One or Mako, and I know you've played a lot of this deck as well, Duncan. This is
Yeah.
nothing too out of the ordinary. Is on Hobgoblins, which is a card I'm a huge fan of. I know you weren't on it on your list because it was a little bit more all in on the speed. But otherwise, yeah, it's got a split of 3 Phoenix, 1 Anger. It's got 3 copies of Ox, so it is pretty good at playing out of the graveyard. It does play main deck Lightning Bolts and 1 Rights. No copies of Goblin Lore. I think that's the card that was missing from your build of the deck that you played a couple of weeks back. But otherwise, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, this just looks like a really strong iteration on probably the best sort of aggro combo style deck in the format.
I think this list is very interesting. I think a big thing to note is 3 Flameblade Adepts. Not
Yeah,
wanting the fourth copy really shows that this deck wants to be a sort of turn 3, turn 4, like insane kill pressure deck rather than a play threat on turn 1 and try to go for a more aggressive turn 2.
yeah,
Like there
this
are no
is
root wallas here. It's yeah.
yeah, that's where those slots came from. I think this is just yeah, sort of a half turn slower, maybe a little bit
Yeah.
more explosive if you think you have the time to get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure this is a much better matchup into like Rhinos because it can go sort of big with the Oxes and the Avoras and Hobgoblins.
Yeah, Hobgoblin has been really impressive. Now, I'm still a defender of the Is It build. I think having access to a couple of sideboard counter spells and breakthrough is a little bit stronger than the mono red build. But hey, mono red does continue to get results, and I think it is a good space to try porting over these threats that are played in the half turn slower Is It build in mono red, and obviously they seem to perform pretty well.
I'm very curious about the lack of Barbarian Rings in the mana base. I assume it's just
Yeah,
for budget reasons, but that card has been amazing in my
most likely.
experience.
It is much better than I evaluated it as well. I think it would be worth a couple of slots, but it was probably just prioritizing, the spell slots for budget. I think the
They gotta
sideboard
fit
looks
three
pretty
Siroccos in the
standard.
sideboard.
The Sirocco is one's a little bit more off the wall. I've never been a big fan of this card. I know it's got some diehard defenders for control or Delver or High Tide matchups. Have you played with this card at all?
I have not, but I've heard some people absolutely loving it, especially against High Tide is the biggest one.
Yeah, now that
I'm
does make
just
sense because they do try to keep a full
yeah,
grit.
I'm just worried it's like so fragile, right? And I think it's not going to do what you want it to a lot of the time.
That's the worry, yeah. It's any of these, browbeat style effects that give your opponent the choice. They don't
Yep.
always pick the choice that you want them to. So I'm not fully convinced, but Idol's a great brewer, and I maybe just need to see it a little bit more in action.
I love the 3 lightning axes in the sideboard as well. Just having some
Yeah,
like form of bigger removal, especially against stuff like Nadu where your lightning bolts won't cut it.
yeah, you
Being able
need
to lightning axe that is
access to
huge.
a turn one instant speed removal spell. I am on a couple copies of Lightning Axe in the Izzet build as well. I think it's just a fine role player. It's not the most exciting thing ever, but it's synergistic. It can go a little bit higher than most red burn spells in the format. And then our last 3-in-1 deck is another friend of the channel, Plasma or 99 Land OTK. This week, not on Native Breakfast, switching it up. We are looking at Gideon of the Trials. This was a bit of a big deal in Standard in its time. Most notable for that bottom zero ability, gives you an emblem that as long as you control a Gideon Planeswalker, you cannot lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. What they paired it with was Deification, which is going to give your Gideon hexproof, and as long as you control a creature, it can't go lower than one loyalty point. It's a way to keep this in play from both burn spells or getting attacked. I also saw 8.5 Tails, which is a really fun build around. I used to play a little bit of this in Casual Commander, where you can just give any permanent protection from white, doesn't say creature, so you can give your Gideon pro white and then make any creature that attacks it into a white creature to preserve that loyalty. And it looks like a lot of the time this is just going to win the game off of the MTGO chess clock. It does obviously have a few decent threats in it. Something like, the 8.5 Tails can ensure that you're pushing through a few points of damage every turn. But it's for the most part focused on getting this locked down, protecting it. We've also got Faith Shield and Blacksmith skill. We got a little bit of interaction with Swords to Plowshares and Balance, and then a couple Staxy creatures. But yeah, it really just wants to get a Gideon in play, protect it, and wait out the game, and it seemed to be very effective at doing that.
Yep, the Anointed Peacekeepers and Sanctum Prelates can really help deal with a lot of the sideboard cards that people will bring in.
Definitely,
Like,
yeah. I'm very high
yeah,
on
all the
Peacekeeper.
artifact enchantment removal, they can just name that post board, and it can be really tough to break through the lock.
Yeah, I got to spectate a little bit of the games, and it's really hard to interact with once it gets going because, Plasma's a smart pilot. He's not gonna not have the proper protection to ensure that it goes off, and it really is just the one avenue for the deck. And the sideboard's really interesting. It's just all one and two ofs. They just want to have a little bit of preparedness for anything once they can bridge the point to get through their combo. But I think once that combo resolves, it doesn't matter how your deck is winning or what kind of board your opponent has because it's they seem to have a lot of confidence that it will get there if given
Yeah,
enough
this
time.
this sideboard is crazy to look at. They have so many random pieces. Just like,
Yeah, I mean, all these cards look reasonable to me, but I'm still pretty used to, okay, if I'm a Soul Guide Lantern deck, I'm going to play at least three of them because there's going to be so many decks it's good against, and I'm going to want to see it early. But hey, maybe just having access to one because there probably is a pretty small amount of slots that you're willing to board out in any given matchup. I assume that's a part of the logic.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense here.
But yeah, this deck was sweet. And with that in mind, I wanted to point out I got myself back up to 8th on the ELO leaderboard. And we're just going to hop over into our gameplay now. All right, so starting off with my round one, I again played against Dan. Seemed to get paired against each other in round one pretty regularly. I had to do a mull all the way down to 5 there. And this is also a little bit of a gamble, but I have a bit of acceleration with the ESG. I'm going to be able to cascade on as early as turn 2, as long as I find something to do with it. But that's the trouble with a lot of these hands. It's hard to find functional mana and both pieces of the combo.
Yeah, you're just hoping for a payoff here.
Basically, yeah. But, we have the ESG, we have untapped lands, and I'm hoping that I have a little bit of time to reach that point. And I don't know what Dan's on yet. Now it becomes pretty clear he's on Rhinos, but a little bit of new innovation on Rhinos using Boom Bust, as well as the Volatile Fault that we discussed in the mana base to punish how greedy these decks have been. And Dan was smart hitting my blue source there. I don't know that he knew for sure what I was on at that point either. If he hit the red instead of the blue, I would have been able to win that turn. And then I eat another Boom Bust. And these, at least, I'm not getting punished for not having basics in my deck, but I know there are volatile faults, or I think it's actually Ghost Quarters in here that will eventually do so.
Yep.
But luckily, Dan just does not find a threat. It takes until turn 4 to even just put a Footfalls on Suspend.
Yeah, you're hoping he doesn't have a mystical dispute or something here.
Yeah, he needs to not have any tempo pieces. And I decide instead of going for channel, I do just have the mana to deploy, so I'm not going to open myself up to Hardcast Dispute or, well, to Dispute. I would be weak, but not to Runescale Stormbrood. So I just play out the
Yep.
Belcher, and he's got nothing for it. In this matchup, I already know that he's playing with land destruction, but I decided not to side in the basic yet. We do just go down that crystal, which is kind of always a free sideboard slot, and we're looking
Yeah,
at 6 here.
another hand where you really need to pay off.
Yeah, exactly. I kept a few like that, and I mostly didn't get punished too hard, but it is a risk. Suspend the Sower on one. Sower is like the weakest card in the deck, but I think it was totally just a necessary role player. Like it lets you just fairly hard cast Charbelcher on turn 3, and there is no other way to accelerate mana that's Cascade friendly, really. Yeah, see,
Yeah,
I
it's
found the payoff in time.
there you go. And yeah, you get it this turn with haste, right? Because of suspend.
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
a kind of cool thing that's not really noticed a lot of the time.
no, yeah, the other suspend spells that we use, they put the tokens in or put the creatures into play from somewhere else.
Yep.
And a Fury there. Now, I'm kind of surprised that these Furies stayed in post board. I believe Rift Sower is really the only target. But it did line up there, keeping me completely choked on mana. Even though I have the Cascade and the payoff, I'm nowhere near casting it.
Yeah, this is probably not a matchup you want to be seeing. Like 8 to 10 pieces of land destruction main board plus counter spells is quite rough.
It is brutal. The what I was hoping to get there off of was pure speed and a little bit of luck, and this game that certainly just didn't line up. But luckily, we still aren't seeing a lot of pressure from the other side of the board. I think with these different builds of Rhinos, it's just finding that balance again, because the traditional build of Minsc and Booze and initiative threats, that's not going to work exactly the same as it did with the way prices are. But whatever new tech we try, we still got to make sure that you're conserving the pressure and aggression that Rhinos is good at. And there we go. Yeah, it wasn't Volatile Fall, it was Ghost Quarter. So I do feel very silly not putting the Mountain in my deck. It ended up that I boarded in the Mountain every match, if I'm not mistaken. So I think if I were to rebuild this, I think it is pretty reasonable to just play one basic in the deck because there are so many, effects like Volatile Fall and Cleansing Wildfire. And you generally will still kill even if you hit a land, especially if it's a mountain.
Yeah.
I end up just scooping it up there, and I felt so choked on mana that I put the one land I cut back in and add in that basic. I think about cutting the Mystical Disputes that I added for game 2, but there are still several good hits. I think that is really the only cuttable thing, though. It's hard to sideboard out much of anything in this list if you want to keep access to both your game plans.
Absolutely. Oh, this is one of those coveted jewel ghostly flicker hands that you were
Yeah,
talking about
this
earlier.
this is the one match where it actually came up. But we're gonna be able to rip it on turn 2 here. So yeah, you see we play out the Pinnacle Monk on the land side with an ESG, can Cascade on turn 2. Use that to cast our coveted jewel. So we're gonna
And
pick
this
up our
is this is
first
just the dream
hit.
scenario here, right?
Yeah,
Like
this is the
you're off to the
fastest it could
races.
possibly be. Dan is tapped down. I heard that he did have a Mystical Dispute in hand and an untapped land, but didn't think I would rip it on turn 2, which is perfectly reasonable. JC, I'm just infinitely recasting the flicker, drawn 3 fresh cards every turn, and I could go through my whole deck and Labman win, but I decided it'd be a little quicker and simpler to just demonstrate the Belcher
You
since
do have
I
the
have
basic in
it.
your deck at this point, right? So
I do,
it's
but it's a
it's
mountain,
sketchy.
so it'll deal double damage, and I did have enough life to keep going if I had to.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right.
Then round 2 against Black Viper, this was the Golgari Charbelcher deck. So it was a little bit of a jump scare seeing the Bridgework battle on turn 1. I thought, maybe it could just be a value land, but it's 90 cents. This is almost certainly a Belcher or Oops variant.
Well, this
That's
is a very nice place to be. Turn to channel with no
it
green lands off
sure
double
is,
spirit
yeah.
guide.
Double Spirit Guide, Hardcast Channel, win on the spot. I mean, there's basically no way to interact with this, certainly not in Viper's colors. And I don't have much information to go off of in boarding, but I figure it's a safe bet that they're Belcher, and I don't have much for that. I could have put in my basic. I think eventually I do, but I decide, I won that game so quickly and so convincingly. Let's try running it back as is. I run into this
Interesting that
decision
you.
point a lot. Yeah,
Yeah, I, it's interesting spot there. Where do you want to deploy the Rift Sower into suspend, or do you want to play the tap land? And
that's the question. Yeah, I do it both ways. It really kind of depends. Here I was looking at 2 tap lands and only 1 untapped and no Cascader. So I thought it was going to be my best game plan to just hardcast Belcher on turn 4. So I wanted to be able to have an upright land that turn and get my tap lands out of the way. Oh, here's that recross the paths. And I promise you I cut out about 3 minutes here of Viper clicking through every individual card in their deck. And they show a Balustrade Spy off the top. And I thought, okay, I never have seen a Belcher yet. Maybe they're playing Oops All spells. I was really not registering what the plan was here. And technically, I could have had an out. If I had drawn the lab man or had the lab man in hand, I would have made them, have to spend a couple turns finding an answer. But no, what ends up happening is they can just cast the spy, and instead of targeting myself or targeting themselves, target me, and my entire deck's gone.
Yeah, it's the classic oops mirror matchup tech where you just spy your opponent instead of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, Rifts were coming off suspend, but I am dead. So with that in mind, I cut the trap for the mountain. There's going to be no spells where that really matters, and maybe that can save me off a spy, but also just I'm on the play. I feel relatively confident with this match. This hand is a little bit gross, but I definitely didn't want to go lower than 5. And if I just draw an untapped land, I can go on to tap land 3.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to play your outs here right, and mulling to 4 is never going to win you the game, even if the
No,
5 is risky.
yeah, especially knowing that yeah they're not cascading, so actual hand hate is something that's available, and they have to take either the coveted jewel or the scour for scrap there. I think that was the correct choice. If it was, something like Inquisition, taking
Oh,
the Shardless Agent probably is the best blend, but yeah, I end up
the
just drawing a
Thoughtseize bug.
replacement.
Yeah.
Thoughtseize Bug in full effect. And that is a deterministic hand once I just find the mana. But this is wild. A Damping Sphere into Charbelcher.
Yeah, this will really slow us down here.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think it's the matchup that it's really intended for, but it does slow me down. It means that for my Cascade, I will need 1 extra mana. Once I get to that point, it should be trivial because it'll just be a couple of extra life points. Not none, because I am, needing to cast a Jewel and a Tutor beforehand. But we get an untapped land, so that does mean we have our 4. Shardless Agent's going to cost its regular amount, but Channel's going to cost me the 1 Spirit Guide in my hand. Now we have the Channel online, 17 life to work with. It is a little bit tight, but we do also get a couple of free cards off this. I would have loved to have hit the Ghostly Flicker line there, but this is the easiest. Just cast the Scour for scrap. I can bonus, grab the Coveted Jewel from my graveyard back to hand. Then there's a Belcher. I do only have 5 life, so I end up needing to make this a pass the turn line. And I could just die, but
Yeah,
that's a
you're
chance that I
very
feel
weak
like I
to
need to
any
take.
hand attack here, so it's quite risky, but looks like they don't have it.
Yeah, just a hard cast.
Playing the Mammoth instead, sending a
Zandu
message.
Mammoth is not that
Yep.
scary to me. And we get up to Xaxis here. I have another untapped land. Get to shoot the Belcher with just 2 life to spare. And we don't flip that many cards, but again, because it's a mountain, it gets there. Yeah, that was a tight game in a lot of axes. And here's our match. And you were 2-0 at this point, right?
Yep.
As was
Had
I.
2 games against, or a game against Jund, and then a game against Mono Black. So lots of creatures.
Yeah, you were ready for that. This is going to be a pretty different axis.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my hand is all right. If I just find a blue source, ideally on turn 2, then it's a really quick win. Any
Yeah, my
later
hand
than
was absolutely nuts.
that, yeah, I mean, any Soul Ring opener is going to be terrifying, right? But
Yep.
this is bad. You do get to drop your post on turn 2. Your full Free Strider engine is chugging, and you put in a second Cloud
I hit the
Post.
second one. It's beautiful.
That's just disgusting. And then there's main deck Volatile Fault. It's really big in this matchup.
Yep.
That commits your
Curious to look
crime
at
for
as
you
well.
too.
It's beautiful to watch.
And yeah, here's that spot. I would love that main deck basic. Even if, if it was a mountain, that wouldn't solve my casting Shardless Agent problem, but you're putting a lot of pressure on. You have so much mana. You're gonna end up hitting me to where like, eventually I may not even have the life to channel. You just go for a big pest infestation there, even with no targets, to put that pressure on my life total is really smart.
Yep. because you're a channel deck, it's just huge to get the chip damage in early.
Yeah. And I do hit the blue source, but I'm looking at it. There is no chance that I get another turn, certainly with not enough life. So I play it out for a little bit longer just to see if I get any more information. But yeah, I'm very deterministically dead at this point.
Yeah, not 9 damage. You can't do much here.
And an
Oh,
extra volatile
another
fall
fault to send a message.
really seals it up. So yeah, land coming straight in. Ricochet Trap basically has no text in this matchup. So that was a really easy swap. These opening hands were bad. This I keep because, again, if it draws a payoff, we could maybe get there.
Yeah,
And
you
then,
have like 12 payoffs in the deck, sort of, so it's not that unreasonable to keep hands like this.
yeah, exactly. And that's one where I do go for the suspend on turn 1 because I know I'm not going to have a turn 2 play, and I do have a bright land to play afterwards.
Yeah,
You get
I
to drop
actually
a
had
Temur
a
Post.
volatile fault in hand here, but I chose not to play it because I knew that you had sided in the mountain because I looked at your deck list earlier.
Well,
So I
fair.
was like, it won't do anything to get this out of here now, and I just want to be greedy and develop.
That's understandable. Yeah, game is game. And I mean, it is still decent to take me off of colors. But yeah, you might, I was on a bit of a lower mole. It's reasonable to want to just progress. And I got pretty lucky drawing the Scour for Scrap there. The Rift Sower having haste gives me that one extra colored pip that I need to execute really quick turn 3.
Yeah. The
And
only out was you hitting the mountain right
I
on top, but
yeah,
alas.
we do get a little bit over enough. Get you to neg 24. And run back the
Pretty
same
good.
boarding plan there. As, as you can see, I mean, the games I win are convincing, but this feels like, very much it is all in combo, right? It feels like Infect, like Oops from Legacy, and a little bit like, your modern Tron as well, where it is a deck that moles really well. You might have to go to 5 or even 4 consistently, but if you can get the right 5 and 4, that's so much better than a 7 that you're gambling on.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. This deck is super polarizing in its matchups and games.
yeah, and you just demonstrate the volatile fault. Just show me you got it to be safe.
Yeah.
And this is crazy. Disruptor Flute is going to be really good against me, and I think this is not the only copy that you deploy.
Yep, it's well worth the almost $3 you spend on each copy.
Yeah, I did intentionally play the Is It Land rather than the Simic there because you had shown the fault at that point, and was hoping that you would just destroy that on turn 2, so I could still have green to suspend the Sower. But a second Disruptor Flute means I'm gonna need so much time, and there's no guarantee your deck's gonna give it to me. Now,
Yeah,
luckily,
and this one also just stops the Belcher fair plan. Not fair, but like play
yeah.
Belcher on curve plan. So
So I'm needing to do a Coveted Jewel line, and my only sort of saving grace was that you hadn't accelerated your own mana yet at that point, but then there was the Cloud Post on turn 4. I'm stuck hard casting crystals to try to get to that point.
yeah,
And you get to flip a post land off your free starter lookout trigger, so you maintain a whole lot of presence on the board. Then we draw the channel. It's gross. I have nowhere near double green. I do after casting crystal as well, yeah. But no action. Even if I draw a Belcher or tutor for a Belcher, it's gonna cost me an extra 6 mana or 6 life that I'm surely not gonna have for long.
yeah. If you had a Pinnacle Monk in play, it might be kind of interesting to try to send it off the Jewel and try to get lucky, but it's
Yeah,
so risky.
that was what I was hoping towards, was find a Pinnacle Monk in time, but I would still need to find a Flicker as well. And then you take me off that second green mana. I did have the option to hardcast a crystal there, but I thought end step scour was going to be my avenue. Obviously, I do grab the old crystal back.
Yeah, being able to just sort of churn through these crystals if I don't have a clock on you is super relevant.
Yeah, does not hurt. There's the Pinnacle Monk. We were just one piece away. I think Jewel might have been the right grab there, truthfully. But
I think it's super reasonable not to go for it there because you're not under a whole lot of pressure at this point,
yeah.
or not yet at
Eventually,
least. But
there's a whole lot of things you could do that would make me feel, okay, now I only have 1 or 2 turns left to live. Second Trench Post is one example of that. And then we get a World
Yeah,
Breaker as
or
well.
this.
Any particular reason why you hit the crystal instead of a land there?
Because it was your second green pip.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But there's definitely a world I hit the land and try to spike another artifact enchantment removal.
Yeah. And yeah, we just continue to draw crystals, things that don't really do anything. I have the option to hard cast a Shardless as a blocker here. I do a lot of deliberating on it because it's really not going to help me much. And then I have to demonstrate to you that I have Channel in my hand. So another removal spell on a green source. But I'm not going to have the life to channel after this turn anyways.
Yeah. I believe at this point I was also holding up a second Disruptor Flute, so
Oh,
it doesn't end well.
yeah, this was a foregone conclusion, but yeah, there we get to see, even if I am able to put blockers in play, Trench Post would also close up the game, probably with more than enough time here.
Yeah, Trench Post hitting your lab man means the Jewel line is no longer really an option.
Yep,
Uh,
especially with my lab bed in the graveyard.
yep, that's and then double faults just seal the deal.
Yep, well, that was a rough one. That was my one loss for the day. Then I got paired down to Movables, who was also on a pretty similar variant of the mono red Mako Hollow One discard list. We ended up keeping a 6 here, and I went on the opposite axis. I kept a lot of hands that had a Cascader but needed to find a payoff, but I realized, I got 8 Cascaders. I can do the opposite. I'm going to keep a hand that has a little bit of mana and a Belcher, hope to draw a payoff,
Oh
and
well,
then
there you
there we
go.
go. Violent Outburst, draw on turn 1. Now, this is one of the best decks at applying life total pressure quick. It depends how they play it, and they don't necessarily know the matchup yet, so they
Yeah,
might not know to put as much early damage on as possible.
you are praying for them not to cast a burning. Oh, there it is. Oh, and
Not
you're fine.
scripted.
Okay.
Yep,
Oh,
it did hit the ESG, which is pretty relevant, but I do get to keep the Cascader and the Belcher. And 15 life is still going to be theoretically more than enough for what I need to do. I deliberate on what land to play there. I decided to do the Pinnacle Monk because I've drawn a Ghostly Flicker. It might be smarter to do a Coveted Dual line.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense here. The green one opens you up to like a Shardless Agent, but you already have the Violent Outburst, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's negligible what Cascader you use because you're using them all sorcery speed and you're trying to win the game right then and there.
Yeah, absolutely.
If Flameblade just comes
Opponent
in for
just attacking
1,
with
that makes me
Flameblade,
feel
yeah.
really confident. They have 2 in hand. They're not out of gas, but I don't know what those
I mean,
2 are.
looks
And if
like
it's
they discarded their Hollow One to the Burning Inquiry, so
yeah,
Hollow One
and a
plus
second
control the court,
Vedette.
so maybe they just, you win some, you lose some with this sort of Hollow One deck.
Yeah, of course, when you leave it up to chance, sometimes that's going to be how you steal matchups you should lose because you get to mess up your opponent's mulligan, but it can screw you over just as bad. But now
Yeah,
we get to just pretty much business as usual. Cascade into our channel. I do have enough life to execute it here.
yeah.
No mountain in deck in game 1, so no chance of whiffing.
I mean, this also sort of goes to show that how important early life total pressure is. Like, you're down to 4 here, and they really haven't been committing to the board that much.
No, there was a lot of
So,
draws for that deck that would have dealt 4 more damage to me.
yeah, absolutely. It's it's quite interesting, these sort of channel decks with their life total management.
Yeah, there's gonna have to be an angle of it, of, watching out for that. I decide I'm gonna throw in a couple of Dead Gons for a turn 1 Mako or Flameblade Adept because that can apply that early game pressure. The Jeskai Crystal and the Ricochet Trap are pretty much always my cuttable slots. Ricochet Trap is just to protect for a burn spell on the Lab Man mainly, and that's not something I'm super worried about from this deck.
Yeah, this is a very nice hand if you can get a payoff. But you also just have the fair Belcher plan on
Yeah,
turn
I will be
3, it
able
looks
to
like. Yeah.
Belcher on 3. I think I have a slight misplay with how I use my mana in this game, but it's not super relevant. There is the Flame Blade on turn 2, and I don't have an answer to it, but the fact that they didn't drop it on turn 1 and then don't have a second threat on turn 2 means I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with my time. And so this
Yeah,
is
this
correct,
is
right? Running out the tap land there.
yeah, because you don't have another untapped land on that turn. But this is
Yeah,
a really slow hand from Hollow One. I'm very surprised they kept it into this matchup, especially
true.
on the draw.
hmm
Or
It,
sorry, on the play, but
luckily, I did keep a little bit of a slower hand as well. This is just a hard cast Belcher, not a Cascade hand. but it does have the capability to do it. And yeah, this one's playing root walls. This is a little bit closer to your build. Oh, they went
Oh, it's on the Asmos. That's interesting.
okay. Asmo Cookbook. That definitely does not lend itself to the hyper aggression fastest build available, but could be good for some of the matchups where it's gonna go grindier, like Rhinos.
Yeah, I've thought about it in the sideboard a lot, but I'm surprised that this is something they're dedicating slots to against a combo deck.
Yeah, yeah, because the removal mode is never gonna be relevant, nor is the life gain from the food.
Yep.
It's just so many slots. I think that this would be a cool plan to have access to grind if it just was like not so many cards in your deck.
I think there was an argument on that Burning Inquiry for you to actually, yeah, you could have gone like pitch your ESG and try to spin into two more ESGs
Oh,
to win
that
there.
is a good point. Yeah. Or no, I had already used one. I
Oh,
only
you
have
pitched when
three
you
in
played
deck.
Belcher on the
Yeah.
last turn. Yeah, yeah. I guess they are getting quite expensive.
Yeah, the use of the budget in this is sketchy. And yeah, either way, I could have played that a little bit differently, but I was losing that game either way. They just did have more than enough pressure. Oh, yeah, that was my mistake, was I didn't need the Pinnacle Monk on the previous turn. I could have played a tap land, used both Spirit Guides to hardcast Belcher, so I would have three more
Oh,
life.
so save 3 life. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So that
Well,
was a slight mistake.
this is a good looking hand.
It is, yeah. I truthfully, I just felt pretty confident in the matchup. Even though I did make a quick mistake there, I felt like turn or game three on the play, I was going to be able to get it back.
Oh yeah, they're dead and they don't even know it yet.
Nope. Yeah, this is yet again probably the fastest hand that the deck has available to it. We have an untapped land, we have a spirit guide we go on too.
Well, you have the turn one channel hands, but those
Yeah,
are
extremely
outrageously
rare.
lucky. Yeah, especially with only three guides in the deck.
All right, so overall the deck definitely performed as well as I wanted it to. Our match was pretty rough, but that's not a matchup that's going to be good for a deck so fragile anyways.
Yeah, the deck looked super awesome.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the channel. Good work on the 3-1 to you as well.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
And thanks everybody for watching. See you on the next one.